Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community mentorship and learning. I am your host, Dave Nava. I'm ably assisted by my colleague, David Albright. We are both solution engineers at Salesforce and Military Trailblazers. Each week, we invite a co-host or sometimes co-host to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, their expertise, and their unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is unlocking your Salesforce potential with training and learning strategies. So whether you're looking for expert tips on training your users or guidance on how you can better enable the learning journey for yourself, this is the session for you. So I would like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host for tonight's session, Kyle Battle. Kyle brings a wealth of experience as a 12-time certified senior Salesforce consultant at Slalom. Not only that, he's also the founder of the Salesforce Anchor. The Salesforce Anchor is not just a solution approach. It revolutionizes learning by connecting new lessons to familiar scenarios. Through this innovative methodology, students gain invaluable hands-on experience configuring the platform and enriching their work portfolios in the process. Additionally, the Salesforce Anchor takes the lead in defining project readiness metrics within the ever-evolving Salesforce hiring landscape. Kyle's expertise in this area empowers professionals to navigate the industry with confidence and seize new opportunities. It is awesome to have you here hosting Office Hours with me, Kyle. Welcome.
Thank you, David. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. This is awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. If you'd like to take just a moment and further introduce yourself and share your Salesforce story, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. So my story starts back in college. I played football for a couple years, and then I got a back injury where I had to stop playing football. So I was all in on sports. I was a creative writing major. I was going to go find a job writing somewhere in the NFL or in the NBA or Sports Illustrated, or that was absolutely my track. But then when I was looking, I actually had some opportunities with the NFL, but then that was the year of the lockout. So I kind of had to find something else to do while that, that was when I was coming up on graduation. So I was like, I got to do something. And I had a friend whose dad ran a sales performance firm that worked with Salesforce. So they helped people close deals better, but they also use Salesforce as a tool to do that. So I went and worked there for a little bit. I saw the platform. It really sparked. Eventually, the light went off. It will have, it happens where eventually it clicks what's going on there. And then my creative side kind of took over again, and I was able to kind of run in a direction that eventually led me to Los Angeles, where I just published my first book. And so I was trying to like become this movie maker and like do all this cool stuff in Hollywood with this storyline, which never happens the way you plan it. Doesn't happen at all in my case, but Salesforce kept me alive out there, right? Like I was able to do consulting part-time for a while, and that really kept me afloat. And then I came across the Special Olympics World Games, which was in Los Angeles in 2015. And I have a brother who's special needs, and I was a Special Olympics coach, and my mom's a coach, my brother's in that. Like it was a match made in heaven. I ended up getting the chance to work there for the 2 years leading up to that, which really gave me a crash course in nonprofit space. It was my first real big nonprofit usage, but also I was a team of one there, so I really had to learn how to get things done and how to be creative and really had to learn the system and know it really well, like the back of your hand. So after that, I decided to become a consultant. And so I said, well, I was able to do all of this stuff with Special Olympics World Games. We had 30,000 volunteer applications, and I was the only person who was the data manager of all of that. So I basically said, I'm going to go to other nonprofits that are already using Salesforce and show them how they can get more out of it, right? How they can kind of activate more things, whether that be volunteers or donor management or whatever. So I consulted and did that freelance for several years, kind of got back into the for-profit space as well. In between there, I took off 6 months to try and go make a documentary, which is another story for another time. But essentially, I ended up coming back to the Salesforce space, and I joined Slalom in 2021, where I decided to not be freelance anymore, which we can have that conversation. I'm happy to talk about whether it be freelance, whether it be with a firm, and the benefits and pros and cons of both. At this point in life, I'm happy to be with Slalom as a consultant. And then in that time, while there, basically brought out this the way that I taught myself was because I had worked in football, I had played football, and I had worked with the football team. I knew enough of their operations. So I built the dev org. And when I started learning new things, this is before Trailhead. This is like several years before Trailhead. It's the only way you could really pick things up. I would just go build it out as if it were in the athletic department. So I would say, oh, I need to learn how to send a flow or create a workflow at the time that sends a email alert. Okay, well, when would that happen? Well, when this person finishes their job, they're going to set this flag and this needs to go. Okay, how would I build that? I go out and build it. Eventually, I got a whole system for the whole athletic department, right? So that idea became the Salesforce Anchor like 10 years later, where now I basically um, train other people that are new to Salesforce how to learn the technology, but through the lens of something that they're already familiar with. So in this, for my case, it was athletics. For some people, it might be like I have a lot of former teachers. So we have one lesson that's based all around the TV show Abbott Elementary, it's a fake school. So we just use the things that happen in those episodes and we configure, oh, well, how would we manage this disciplinary process? Or there's a new transfer. Okay, what are we using those things to orient us? I actually have one. The first one that I did under the anchor was military veterans. So I actually have one session anchored around the PCS process and leave requests where we build out using Service Cloud. How do you submit a request? How do you track your inventory? How do you keep track of what stuff got broken and all that other kind of stuff through in an hour-long course? And so basically, like my goal is to find what is that anchor, right? What is it that you know like the back of your hand that I can then translate Salesforce into, as opposed to the opposite, where a lot of people feel like they come into Salesforce and they have to completely wipe the slate and learn this entirely new platform and this new business lingo. Like, there's a way for you to bring everything you already have and know and use that to your advantage when learning. And I'm just here to try and help tease that out. So I'll stop there. I know there's more agenda, but I'm sure we'll get into some questions at some point.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Kyle. There's so much to unpack there, and we're going to get into the Salesforce Anchor and provide some more examples of that here later in the session. You know, it's interesting how many folks wind up in the Salesforce ecosystem that didn't imagine themselves ever doing Salesforce or didn't even know what Salesforce was. And I see David Albright kind of chuckling. That was my path as well. I wanted to be a program manager, but somehow it just worked out. I love that the Salesforce Anchor is grounded in real world scenarios, because that's often what I recommend is like, hey, if you want to get some alternative work experience, build apps to
Right.
solve everyday business challenges or even your own challenges. And that's a great way to leverage the platform to show that you know how to configure and get that work experience when folks may not be willing to hire you out the gate because you're brand new. So we'll go ahead and cover some brief admin items, and then we'll get into the discussion. Right. And so if you're joining for the first time, I see some new faces out there, which is awesome. I always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours before we open the floor for questions and general discussion. So these sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with both military trailblazers and allies. Absolutely everyone is welcome to explore primarily non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics so that we collectively can help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. For this next hour, this is your opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and both ask and answer questions from your perspective, which will, of course, provide a rich dialogue and make the answers that are received much, much better. Please do watch the chat window if you haven't already during tonight's session. David Albright's going to post some great information in there, including learning, networking, and employment opportunities. And if you would like to post your LinkedIn profile, please feel free to do so. We're here to connect and to network, so I'd love to see that. This is your session. So if you want to ask a question at any point during today's session, please feel free to do so. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up by raising your hand in the Google Meet app, you can also post your questions in chat, and I'll be scanning that throughout the session, and we'll do my best to bring those up in the order received. And then finally, tonight's session is being recorded. So if you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let me know before speaking, and I will make sure that my awesome video editor pulls that out of the final recording. All right. So let's open it up. So I think we all know that learning and staying up to date with the Salesforce platform is crucial, not only for newcomers, but also for existing professionals in the ecosystem. And you've got 3 releases per year. There's new features introduced at Dreamforce here coming up, and TDX, continuous updates on the App Exchange, unofficialsalesforce.com, and other platforms. And so what that means is staying current can be really challenging. And in tonight's session, I think we're going to start with exploring personal learning strategies. So Kyle, to begin, could you share the learning strategy that you employ to stay current as a 12-time certified Slalom consultant in your chosen functional areas? For example, like, how do you set learning goals? How do you find relevant learning materials? And how do you, and this is the most crucial in my opinion, how do you allocate dedicated time for focused learning amidst all the other things that you're doing?
That's cool. There's a lot of questions there. Okay, so the first thing I'll say is you basically well, I don't necessarily allocate time the best, so don't necessarily learn from me, but I will share my experience. For me, I typically will do a lot of my learning in between projects. Like I'm old school in the Salesforce space where I believe that before you take a certification, you should have, like, we used to have to do a project first in Sales Cloud and then go take the Salesforce exam because that was the only way that you could learn. And so I'm very much in that space to where I like to get some experience in a space before I actually take the exam so that I feel more comfortable, so that I can be more, I guess, flexible, where I fielded some of those unconventional questions that made me kind of really understand, okay, this is why you do this, this is why you would do that. And then I feel better equipped to answer those questions. So I typically I like to try to have a project under my belt before I do that. Again, you don't always have the ability to do that, and that's kind of where I'm a dev org advocate until I die. I've probably got 50, 60 dev orgs that I've created just from different ideas where I'll see something. I might be in a Trailhead course where I see, let's say, chatbots, right? For some reason, I got in the Service Cloud, I'm in chatbots, I build this thing out, and I'm like, oh, this would be useful with this. So now I can go back to my college app and I can say, oh, what if you're a recruit that wants to play softball and you want to interact with the chatbot first, right? Then maybe that chatbot pulls up a form that asks your name and position and your batting average. Like, just trying to integrate the new stuff with your anchor, right? And just kind of bringing everything in a context that you understand. To me, that's helped me learn better. Now, I've also had the fortune to see lots of different companies use Salesforce in a lot of different ways. And so that has equipped me with that kind of that kaleidoscope view, I guess, of how Salesforce can be used in various different ways. So the other part of that is just, again, you just kind of got to get the experience, whether that be in the system as a dev org that you're playing with, whether it be a playground that you spun up from a particular use case on Trailhead, whether it's just, hey, it would be cool for, what if my church used Salesforce to track its tithes and offerings on Sunday? What would it look like? I don't know. Go figure it out. Like, just come up with ideas of where Salesforce could be used and just go out and build it. And you'll realize that you become a really agile and, okay, yes, this is what cases and this is what campaigns are, but this is how they're typically used. But now you can kind of really consult, where you can kind of talk through, okay, here's the gray area, and you're just more equipped with that experience that just brings the confidence that really makes you a good admin or consultant. So I know that was kind of a roundabout answer, but that's kind of, that's how it is for me.
All good stuff. And I see your hand, David, and I'll grab your thoughts in a second. I like that you've got multiple different dev orgs. I do as well. But what I found, and I use those and I build it in those routinely, what I found, like as a solution engineer, is we have to frequently provide demos to customers. And so the goal is to create these reusable assets that any SC can use, for their deals, down the line. You don't want to create one, be done, and then have to create a new one. It takes a lot of time. So I've got maybe 10 different demos that I've built from scratch. And anytime we get a new functionality, like you were mentioning, I'll go, okay, how can I use this functionality in the context of this demo or that demo? And I'll go build it in that demo. And then anyone else who has access to that demo can use it as well. So they stay up to date in that way. So it's a great example. Thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I think what Kyle's saying is super smart. Like, two things, and I've said it before on here, is there's two things that are hard in here, is getting through those certs, right? But focus on force can help you. And if you're good with passing tests, right, you can kind of breeze through tests. I probably went through a period where I knocked out a bunch of tests, but really didn't have a lot of experience with the product. What Kyle's saying gives you a little bit of that hands-on experience, right? Because those questions on those tests are not really based in reality, right? If you actually do config, you go click on something, you're like, oh, that didn't work. It's the other button. And you click that and then it works, right? The test is you have to know, is it this button or that button? And so having hands-on experience with it gives you a little more of that memory to kind of go like, oh, what was it? Oh, I remember clicking that. Part two of that equation is, and this is really smart and helps you down the road, is as you're building these things, if you build a project, especially one that you're a little passionate about, it gives you a little bit of a portfolio, right? You can pull those dev orgs back out when you're in an interview and be like, yeah, I passed the test. I haven't gotten experience yet with a company, but let me show you what I built. And this is what I used to actually pass the test. And this is based off of something that was at my local church that I found, you know, a use case for. And so it gives you really quite a talking point when you don't have a lot of background or experience with the product. So I think it's wicked smart.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate that. We've got a question from Jason, which directly aligns with this part of the discussion. He's asking, what's better to use for a demo, developer org or one of the 30-day free trial orgs? And then, you know, general question about are there may be differences in feature access? And so I've definitely got a thought, but Kyle, what's your perspective?
Definitely a dev org if you can, but it's because it's a longer shelf life. I don't remember exactly how long, but I just got an alert from one of dev org that said it would expire in like 180 days or something like that. So I think it's like 2 years. It's a long time. You can really do stuff with it. So in the case that, like David was saying, you want to show a demo or something, and you want to have something just kind of hidden away that you can recall, I think the dev org is going to be better. Just got to make sure you log in once every like 3 months. The advantage to the 30-day orgs though is that they usually have a lot of other features already fleshed out. Like I just had a net zero cloud dev org expire, but it comes with like pre-built dashboards and there's data. I mean, and there's data in dev orgs, but it's like just accounts and a couple contacts and a campaign or two, and like it's you pretty much the same across the board. Whereas those 30-day orgs typically have more robust data that if you're trying to solve something that requires that, those are useful. So know that. I'm not saying don't use 30-day orgs. They do have a benefit, but just kind of, if you're putting something that you want to ever be able to retrieve, I recommend the dev orgs on that. And you can get dev orgs that are specific to like Sales Cloud or Service Cloud or just the different areas that come with certain things pre-built already. So you don't have to always necessarily start from scratch.
Yeah, great points. That would make me nervous, building in something and putting some time into it, then 30 days it expires. So just be conscious of that, like Kyle was mentioning. And you can usually find, like the reason why those exist is because they're usually introducing a feature set like Omni Studio or CRMA, to Megan's point. But you can usually find similar orgs through a simple search. And I've got a website I'm going to pull up here and send you that, where it's not limited to 30 days. There are Trailhead-based dev orgs with CRMA, with Omni Studio, and with some of these features that you can keep for a while. My generic dev org I've had since 2018, and I think as long as you keep logging into the generic ones, you'll retain access. It's when you don't log in for a while, it gives you a few warnings, and then it shuts it down. But great question, Jason. Keep them coming.
If you haven't logged in for 180 days, it gets marked as inactive, and then it goes through 3 different gates, day 1 through 14, 15 through 44, 45 later, and then the org is permanently deleted. So,
yep. Question from Jim: difference between dev org and a playground. So dev org, there's a lot of different dev orgs out there. Typically, like if you were just to spin up a free dev org, it's got very limited data. It's essentially, think of it as a clean org where it's got a baseline set of capabilities and very little data. Playgrounds are pre-populated with data because they're expecting you to do a project in there or complete a module where you need access to that data. So they have a bit of dummy data, and a lot of times those playgrounds will feature specific capabilities dependent upon the module that they're being spun up with, like CRMA, Omni, loyalty management, things of that nature. So I would say if you want to play around with the platform and have fun and explore a lot of different things, spin up those Trailhead playgrounds. If you want just something clean that you can build from scratch and there's not a lot of noise in there, use a dev org, and that'll be helpful.
And if I can add on to that, a lot of times I'll do both, where I'll go through Trailhead and I will create playground for a particular scenario, and then I'll see how to use it. I'll like it, and then I'll decide to go back and put it in with the other org, with the other stuff, and kind of get that next level of experience. So they don't have to necessarily be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, great point. All right, good to see some folks joining. Hey, Carrie. Hey, Larry. All right, so we talked about dev orgs, about playgrounds, about getting hands-on. I'm wondering if you, and I know you're primarily, as you mentioned, you're a hands-on kind of guy, old school. You want to build it before you test it. Do you have any learning resources outside of dev orgs or playgrounds that you go to just to stay current? Maybe blogs or sites?
To stay current, yeah, there's a couple. Salesforce Ben has a lot of good content that's usually good. I usually read his release notes just to kind of find out what the highlights are from each release. Now, there are obviously release notes. They're very extensive. Um, I guess I'm a TLDR. I would rather, read the short version than kind of go through all that, but it is nice to kind of get those. So Salesforce Ben, focus on force. I heard somebody mention that. I passed, I think every cert that I have that they have, I use them for. I'll put it that way, right? There's a couple that they don't offer things for, but I've gone through, I'm going to say 8 or 9 of those. And if you can, again, their quizzes, if you can successfully, consistently get through their quizzes, then you're probably in good shape to get through the real test. Like, you're going to learn the right stuff. And they figured out how to word their questions like the exam, which is kind of the hardest thing. Especially knowing that, I think someone else mentioned, like, on the exam, there's usually one really right answer, one sort of right answer, and then one right answer, right? Like, you kind of got to know the best one. And so focus on force will help you know how to kind of sift through those keywords to know what the answer to that is. Those are probably my main 2, and then Trailhead. I mean, anything that you really want to do, you can at least start that path in Trailhead. And for me, I try to find a way to transition that into a dev org. That's just my process, and trying to attach that to something else. And I know someone else also mentioned, it is an opportunity to build out a portfolio. I hear that word thrown around a lot, of just having something demonstrable that you created that you can point to. That also solves a problem. I think that's the part that people sometimes miss, is that you want to make sure that you can speak to how your solution actually solves some problem. But I would say that's my process. And then I'm not close to anything. I'm very interested in the AI side of things and where that grows. I have played around with ChatGPT to see kind of what it knows about Salesforce. Don't trust it yet, but I see potential there. But yeah, I would say mostly, and like Twitter. I mean, the Ohana on Twitter and LinkedIn is probably my main source, or the places where I'll go. But yeah, I would say those are probably the main ones. Focus on Force, Trailhead, and Salesforce Ben.
Yeah, same here. I do love Focus on Force, and they're constantly updating their content and coming up with new exams as the ecosystem evolves and as they put new ones out, which is awesome. We'll close out kind of the personal learning strategy section with just a follow-on question. Does the Trailblazer community contribute to your learning strategy? And if so, how do you leverage that? Maybe you have if there's tricky problems that come up in your day-to-day project work with Slalom, how do you use that as a resource? If you do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first off, Slalom has a great internal Salesforce community as well. So we have a lot of awesome conversations there. But yeah, I would say actually on the other side, more so, I get people ask me. So as I go through the different Anchor courses, people see me mostly in flows. I've noticed as of late, as flows continue to get more and more sophisticated, where someone will say, hey, like, I'm trying to do this and I know it can be done, but how can you do it? Right. And so I'll help, and we'll screen share or do something of the like to try and help them get through that. So it's interesting because I would have thought that I was still on the the student side of that. But in the last year or so, it's definitely flipped to where I've kind of been on more of the teacher side of the flow start and kind of helping people in that space, which I absolutely love. I've done some really creative things with, that's where my creativity gets to have a lot of fun, just from my creative background. is building out flows and doing really cool creative flow streams and things like that. But yeah, I don't even remember the initial question. Sorry, I'm rambling.
Yeah, no, all good stuff. It was how does the Trailblazer community, or do you leverage the Trailblazer community to provide additional insight into study for your exams, or just in answering tricky project related questions?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always the resources, the developer resources. There's the help community. You can post the questions, and you'll see the forums and all of that stuff is great. I also like there's certain events like FlowFest. That is, I think they've had version 5 or version 6 as of now, which is Salesforce band in Ohana, and they basically just put out these flow challenges. So it's cool to see other people in the Salesforce space being creative in their own way, or kind of flexing their muscles around a certain business problem that you might kind of flex a little differently or whatever. So I enjoy that. I like to kind of push the boundaries of what's possible. And so things like that are really useful. I do a lot of sitting in on a lot of the webinars, LinkedIn webinars on like third-party products that you can pull from the App Exchange into Salesforce. You can pick up a lot of cool tips there and use cases of how people are doing things. Honestly, stuff like this, right? Joining webinars like this when they're available. A lot of them are public, right? You just kind of got to know the right people, but this is you'll see what's happening. The nice part about the Salesforce community is that you have people that are at it's all parts of it, right? People who are just starting out who heard about Salesforce last week, and then you got people like me who have been doing this for over a decade, right? And we're all here trying to share. And it is, I mean, I'll get up on the podium right real quick, but like if you haven't tried to poke around in other technology spaces like the ServiceNow or the Microsoft or just like other tech, their communities aren't like the Salesforce community. They're just not, right? Things that I've even tried to replicate with the Anchor in other technologies. And part of the reason why it hasn't happened yet is because the communities there aren't nearly as strong as the Salesforce community is. So lean on it. There's someone out there that'll help you. It might not always be me, might always be David, but there's someone out there that is willing to help. I think that's generally a kind of a consensus across the board. So whether you're looking through the forums, or if you just post on your LinkedIn, or if you're on Twitter, or the Trailblazer community, or maybe wherever, put it out there. There's questions. I think there's a Salesforce questions used to be a site, right? Or ideas. Put it out there, right? Yeah. Like someone will answer that for you.
Yeah, no, it's great because you're right. We have this unique space called the Trailblazer community that doesn't exist in other ecosystems, and I've had several friends and colleagues that have gone off to other companies and have come back, what's called boomeranging, because maybe the pay was great at a different company, but they just didn't feel like they fit well, and it wasn't as positive, a work experience that they have here. So it's good to hear that mentioned. We have a question from Jason. And Kyle, if you don't have any thoughts, I've got some thoughts. I'm going to call on Carrie here. So Carrie, I'm giving you a warning to talk about this as it relates to your job. Jason asks, since Hiring Our Hero Salesforce Fellowship Program recently changed their acceptance policy to current service members and military spouses only, i.e. no veterans, are there any other career transition programs that are similar to the Hiring Our Heroes Salesforce Fellowship, like Revature, Revlon, etc.? I don't know, Kyle, are you aware of any? If not, I've got some thoughts.
The only one that I would mention would be Meravis, and I'm not 100% sure on their criteria, but I didn't hear their name mentioned. I would just look into that, but I'll defer to you beyond that.
Yeah, Meravis is a great thought. It's so if you haven't heard of Meravis, it is essentially a nonprofit in the Salesforce education space that will accept your Salesforce military course vouchers to be able to join one of their cohorts, where they will immerse you in a multi-week experience to prepare for an exam, which includes a 1 week either on-site or remote course. So they have admin cohorts, platform app builder cohorts, sales cloud, service cloud, etc. And then you also get the benefit of being admitted to their really helpful community of alumni. I know that Salesforce is actually putting together an internship, and the details right now aren't out yet, but it's in the works. So you can probably expect some news from Trailhead on that in the future. And I mentioned I was going to call on Carrie because I know a lot of companies, especially the bigger ones, like Deloitte, PwC, Accenture, BAH, have programs where they will train you in Salesforce. Carrie, is Booz Allen sponsoring any of those right now that you're aware of? Carrie might not be able to. There we go.
So Booz Allen typically tries to keep their pace with HOH. They don't necessarily just have folks coming in from hiring our heroes. And I always encourage folks, whenever the applications or their period for applying comes, I always tell folks, you don't have to be through the HOH program. Like, you can do it outside of that. And there is a benefit to that because you're immediately a salaried employee with benefits. Whereas if you're doing HOH, you're an hourly employee for 3 months. So that's part number one of it. Part number two, yes, it is academy setup. So they transition you into it. And so they definitely are there to build you up and help you gain experience. And then in terms of dates, I have zero idea on dates. So, but it's something worth, keeping in mind. If you look at their career page and you ever see any like junior Salesforce BA or junior Salesforce solution engineer, junior Salesforce developer, those ones specifically are kind of your cue that they've got the applications going. And then I was going to add to that too, just creating a whole bunch of use cases and solving business problems are going to help you when you go out and start applying for other roles. Because I can't tell you how many, types of situations like that where I've been able to gain experience just off of solving some other problems. And that's not necessarily with a dollar attached to whatever project I was working on, but just continuing to gain that hands-on experience.
Yeah, that's helpful, Carrie. Thank you. I appreciate that. We've got a couple more comments and questions here in chat, and then we'll get those answered, and then we'll take a quick pause to grab a group photo. So Rebecca's asking, or Rebecca mentions that Meravis charges a $250 fee. Any feedback on their services? Feedback, yes. I've gone through the Meravis program. I'm a Meravis alum. I took 2 of their courses. It's a phenomenal level of support, and I recommend it to anyone. They used to, once you completed your exam, they used to refund a portion of that fee. I'm not sure if they still do, but worth looking into it. And even if they don't, still a really worthwhile program, because even once you receive their assistance to pass the exam, again, you get access to that extended family of alum, and it's great for networking and for locating opportunities. And then we'll pivot back to Carrie's question before we take a quick photo. And Carrie's asking, you may have gone over this earlier, but with all the different roles available in the ecosystem, what drew you to your current role? And I would tag onto that. What drew you to your current role, as well as Slalom? I've heard great things about Slalom. I think Slalom has the most golden hoodies of any organization other than maybe Salesforce, which is interesting. But yeah, if you've got some thoughts on that, Kyle. And you're on mute right now. Sorry.
Sorry, you threw me off with the golden hoodie compliment. What was the
question? No, the original question was, what drew you to your current role? And I was adding on to that, the consultant role. And then what drew you to Slalom?
Gotcha. So what drew me to my current role is SA. I see that here in the chat now. Solution architect. For me, I started off as a BA, as a business analyst, and just kind of watching projects and taking requirements and wasn't really building anything. And eventually kind of graduated throughout the different roles to see a lot of different parts of the project. In that, I realized that I'm a pretty big picture thinker, right? I think maybe the Special Olympics kind of accelerated that for me, but having to be in charge of, ultimately we had about 18 different systems in one. Like there were like all these little silos that had to kind of, work together in certain scenarios. So it ended up being like a pretty big undertaking. And for me, it was earlier in my career. So I guess I just kind of got thrown in the fire in that respect. Yeah, that'll be it.
And then
Sorry.
what kind of drew you to what drew you to slalom, and what keeps you there for folks that might be
What drew
interested
me
in?
so let's see. What drew me to slalom was I worked freelance for a long time. And so there's definitely benefits to that, you know, making your own hours, you get to take your own projects, you get to say no to projects, you get to do a lot of different things. There's also a lot of uncertainty there. You don't get paid regularly. You're on the hook for everything, you know, anything that the whole, you know, there's a lot, right? There's just a lot more that's on your shoulders. That made sense for me for a while in my life, but then honestly, I met my wife and life slowed down and kind of had to think about things a little bit longer term. And eventually was looking to find a partner where I could work, where I could still do big projects and still get the big picture thinking. I still want to kind of teach. I like to teach and pass, you know, whatever knowledge I have. There's a structure for that. And yeah, that's probably the biggest reason I'm lucky. And yeah, I was very fortunate to find slalom at the time that I did. Um, and I'd say the biggest thing that I enjoy now, which might actually resonate with this particular group, is being a part of a team, right? Like I was kind of a lone wolf for a while out there, just trying to like find my way in the Salesforce space. And it admittedly was a little bit easier than it is now. The ecosystem has definitely kind of evolved post COVID. So it was a lot easier to kind of bounce around as a freelancer there. I'm not sure exactly how it is now, but I think the biggest thing there is that it changes for everybody. Like I know people and I started off at a smaller firm and they went to a bigger firm. They got bought out by a global firm before I went to an in-house admin and then a freelance and then back to a boutique firm and then eventually just like don't feel like you have to decide or know at any given time. It really depends. Um, it takes some experience to even learn what you like. In that respect, I like being able to shift it up. I do sometimes get bored with projects, and I know that sounds bad, but my brain's always going in so many different areas that I want to be able to jump. So being at a place that I know has a lot of projects with deep resources that if I do a 6 month project and get burnt out on Service Cloud, I can, you know, hey, I want to do something over here in Sales Cloud or CPQ or something, and you know, let's try it for 3 months. Find me a 3 month project and let's see. Okay, that works out cool. I'll stay on and extend. You have a little bit of that flexibility, but a lot more of the structure than you do as a freelancer. I'll put it that way. Which for me is what I'm looking for right now.
Yeah, that's a great overview. That's what drew me to consulting initially before solution engineering was the access to all those great problems. And I'm like you, I get bored if I'm doing the same thing for too long. So it was that shift, being able to switch from not only different industries and business processes, but different product focuses based upon what the customer's asking for. So that's awesome. So we're going to go ahead and take a pause here and grab a group photo, which we do every week so that we can always be branding and share that on social media. If you want to unmute your video, don't have to, but totally your option. We will grab a quick snapshot and then I'll share that afterwards on LinkedIn. And so if you'll hold comments temporarily so they don't cover my face, that'd be awesome. And I will give you a 3-second warning. All right, David Albright, I'm looking at you because you have the goofy face during photos. All right, looking good. There we go. 3, get my tool ready to go here. 2, 1. All right, success. We're going to shift gears here a bit now for the remaining 20 or so minutes. And I do still want to make time to talk in more depth about the Salesforce Anchor. Our next topic is user training. So we've talked about personal or personal learning strategies. Now we're going to focus on our users. And so, you know, whether you're an admin managing an org, you're a consultant implementing a new org build for a customer, or you're like myself and some other folks on the call, a pre-sales professional, increasing the potential for adoption through user training is of huge importance. And so, Kyle, you know, when you're designing or when you're participating in the design with your colleagues of training programs, what factors are you considering to ensure that what you've built for the customer has high adoption?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so when designing, okay, I gotta write this down. What? Okay, so the first thing that I would say there is I think it's very easy to do boring tech demos, right? Like we've all seen very boring. It is very easy to fall into that trap. To me, this is where my creative writing can really come into play because I feel like if you can walk them through a narrative, yeah, we've all given them, right? We're on the wrong side of that. Then I think it just draws them in. So one of the things I like to do with all of my training is to create a scenario that we can all get. I'm going to use this word anchor a lot, but everyone can anchor around that. And that usually is rooted in a certain like persona. So you want to understand the persona. But the big point of all of that is making sure that you can show someone what do they struggle with, how do they expect to solve it, and how are they going to solve it now that you fix something else, right? And once you kind of walk through that from the storytelling, I mean, that's kind of like your beginning, middle, and end, right? You're kind of setting it up like this is what you want, this is the problem. And I almost kind of juxtapose, right? Because it's like as you build out Salesforce solutions, one of the things you'll see is that people kind of fall into this just accepting that the way they do their jobs sucks. It sounds bad, but like there are a lot of bad Salesforce orgs out there. It's just real. You might have to train someone who's in an org that's not set up great. People just come to accept that, hey, it takes me 20 clicks to do this. That's just the way it is, right? Well, we know the time we get to this training, you're gonna be like in tears. You're gonna love me. People using Classic, right? Because I'm gonna show you how you can do all of that in 5 clicks because the flow makes more sense. The user experience has had, a chance to kind of, cultivate itself into a UX that makes sense and all that stuff. So I think it's important to call those out when you're training end users because they sometimes come in with those preconceived notions of what's possible. And you're sometimes the shepherd of the possible or the impossible in some cases where they don't think it's something that can happen. So that's one of the things I like to play, like kind of like the hero of the story in the training, really is the system. The system is the hero, right? Like we're going to leverage the system in a way that allows you to get over that bridge or whatever that might be. And so training is the chance to really convey that. And a lot of times it's that first chance. So like for me, I like to draw it out into like a narrative where, okay, let's say we're doing a furniture store training. We're in the store. Johnny and his son just walked in. They want this couch in blue. And how are we going to log it? Let's just stop there, right? But let's just finite, perfect, happy path you might hear. Let's just walk through that, show the art of the possible. And then once you've done that, you kind of, people were like, oh, this system doesn't have to suck. Okay, well, maybe I'll see the next demo, right? And you kind of keep them on. Again, you're getting to turn the page in storytelling terms, right? And eventually you get to the end and it's like, oh, well, I have this beautiful report that tells me all of these things that I would want to see. And I just walked through the steps that it took to produce that report. Okay, now I'll log in without a problem now. I get it, right? So now your user adoption goes up because they understand why they're using the system. And I'm using that example, and that's a fringe. You won't run into users that are that skeptical all the time, but you might, right? They're out there, right? Like you don't know what system you might end up with, what users you might have. And so yeah, that's kind of the way that I like to think about that training is just try to like understand their problem. You want to make sure that you empathize with the users, right? We understand that this process sucks, right? I get it. I agree. Watch what we can do when we leverage the system the right way. And then from there, you become a trusted resource. They will now come to you with ideas like, oh, well, is there a way that you can automate this to happen when this happens? Or can you automatically email them when I check off? Now you're getting the requirements that allow you to be an effective admin because you know what the users need. And that's all because they trust you because of the way that you trained. And that was a lot of different pieces, but I think that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense, and I'll anchor on a couple points. One, I like the use of a narrative, right? Because I was joking, and well, I wasn't joking. I was serious in chat when I said I've given bland technical demos. It's true, and that was early on in my solution engineering career. I like to think, and not recently, but it was because like I was giving a demo like I would demo to a product owner after I had just done a build as a consultant, not um, not dem where I should have been demoing to someone who really didn't understand the Salesforce platform and was trying to imagine how they could use it to solve their business challenges and get them excited. And so to your point, Kyle, I think it's critical to get users excited about the platform. And one of the ways you can do that is training. And the best way to do that is with a narrative. And it's the same with demos. The best way to get customers excited about potentially buying Salesforce, you give them a demo, but you include a narrative. You've got your personas or these personified people, like manager, business user, support person in a call center, person who's answering, person who goes to a customer portal and needs support, whatever those personas are. And as you talk from their perspective, you weave this narrative, you tell this compelling story that gets people interested. And so that's a great segue for spending about we're going to spend about the last 10 minutes or so talking about the Salesforce Anchor.
Before you move on, can I just throw one pro tip in at the end of that last one? So this is, listen up, for those who are looking to build impact with that narrative, I'll just say this, research in-app guidance and figure out how you can leverage that to also align with your narrative. So basically that can create little walkthroughs of, let's say, how to create an account or how to, add someone to a campaign or whatever. And you have the ability to configure certain parts of it. Use that with your narrative as a way to show in your portfolio. Not only do I understand how this process works, but I can put tools in place to help others also follow the same process.
Yeah, that's a great feature. And if you're not familiar with in-app guidance, it's a Salesforce feature where you can design anchored, I use the word as well, anchored or floating prompts. You've got guided workflows, a series of screens that you navigate through. And essentially it introduces features, it introduces functionality, it provides actionable buttons that you can take you to additional knowledge articles. It's a way to onboard users, train users, and you can use it really anywhere for anything. It's an awesome resource. And also, if you aren't aware, the help icon in the upper right-hand corner of your Salesforce org is also customizable. So you don't necessarily have to use the same help resources that Salesforce recommends. You can create your own section of that help feature with whatever resources you want. And I've used that in demos as well. I will say, I want to ask one more question. So before we move on, because you sparked kind of a thought. When I was leading a project, or even when I was mid-project, obviously there's a statement of work, right? There's the things that you have to do for a project. Or if you're an admin, you've got your user stories from your users, and that's kind of your statement of work. That's what you have to build. But then there's opportunities throughout there where you can add what I like to call delighters. These are extra little things that maybe don't cost you much time. They're not in the statement of work. They're not in your user stories, but you spot a need there, and you can very quickly build those. And they're like little surprises for your users, because that would probably be helpful. Do you have any examples of that, Kyle, in your experience with consulting? Little things you would do for the customer that would kind of push you over the top?
For sure. Yeah, I'm just writing down a few of those right now. So for me, it's all like UI things you want to get people to use the system more. The first thing I'll mention is just the status path. If you're on a Lightning record page, creating a status path, mostly because you can have confetti fire off the page whenever someone reaches a certain value, a certain status, right? People love that. I'm surprised, users really love. I had a couple projects where that was the only thing we added, and it was like, everyone loves this screen now. So use the confetti to your advantage. Status paths for sure. Another thing that I like to do is I like to do a lot of stuff with images. So in that status path as well, hiding just like GIFs throughout the system, where when you get to that's along with the confetti might be like a fun meme of the minions or something like that saying yay or whatever, just like little fun things along the way that don't really interfere. You don't want it to get in the way of people doing their job, so there is a balance there. But I definitely like to use those. And then the other thing is status images. And this is a little bit riskier. You kind of have to be in the right org with the right users to where this doesn't become a distraction also. But if you've got a status of active versus inactive, and then you can take that and also use, there's the red light, green light icons, right? Or you could do a stop sign or a yield sign and things like that. But you could also have it render a positive GIF or a negative GIF, right? Like a sad Mickey Mouse or a happy Donald Duck, right? You can do different things like that to just add what I call it flavor, or you call it delighters. I like that. But things like that where possible. Again, it's definitely a delicate balance of you don't want to overdo it. I'll just say that way. You got to make sure you're not overdoing it. But I do think that the admin has the right to put their stamp on the system also. And that's one of the ways that I'll put the stamp on mine.
Yeah, great example. Also known as Easter eggs, but fun little things.
Yeah, Easter eggs for sure.
To get your users excited. So we're gonna do our final pivot because I want to spend some time on the Salesforce Anchor. And so obviously the Salesforce Anchor kind of supports both of the spheres that we've talked about tonight, both with personal learning strategies as well as training users if that happens to be something that you have to do for your role. So Kyle, could you share the Salesforce Anchor's mission and its contribution to the Salesforce ecosystem for folks that may not be aware of what it is?
Absolutely. So the idea behind the Anchor is that we will help people who are moving into the ecosystem to better learn the technology through a lens with which they're already familiar. And so that's the first part, is helping people just pick up the technology more easily. The other side of it is on the hiring side. And so what happens is as people get these certifications, they build out these portfolios, we have to also educate the people that are hiring to know how to read those portfolios and how to sift through those certifications when everybody has them or whatever that might be, right? And so what we're working to do is basically set up, I'm calling it it's basically like a rubric. It's a qualitative and quantitative rubric that says this and it establishes project readiness. So beyond just you have a certification or you have this background, but also says you're ready to be put on a project or to be an admin of a system. And the factors of that are not just how many certs do you have, how well do you know Salesforce, but also what business acumen do you already have, right? If you were a principal or the superintendent of a school already, you're coming into the space. Once you've learned it, you're going to be a superstar, right? You're going to know how to really make impact because you understand the process. Well, we're basically going to try and bridge that gap to where we can sort of find that score of this is what you can do in the system. This is what you know about the industry. This is how well you can manage a project. Here, therefore, you are probably ready. And then we measure to that, right? So then if people aren't getting there, then we can evaluate it. So the other side of the Anchor is that you submit, as you create a course, you create me as an admin user. So I can log in and I can see what you're building and I can give feedback. And as you expand it based on your experience, I can see that and we can have a conversation. So I'm seeing that. And if I see that your score isn't quite where it might need to be, we can now work on that. And you're now working towards the same rubric that they're working from. And so hopefully matchmaking will be the benefit of that. That's the grandiose big picture goal. Obviously, we're not there yet, and there's a lot of different players involved, but that's kind of the problem we're trying to address, is people coming into the system and feeling comfortable, but then also being able to get that first job as quickly, as they got into the system and got certified, so that momentum doesn't stagnate, which I know is happening for some people in the space right now. So we're trying to tackle that issue, but it's a big one.
Yeah, it's commendable, and I'll echo Carrie's comment in chat. That is really cool. If I can leverage the collaborative mentality of this community and call on Larry. Larry commented in chat that Salesforce Anchor is awesome. Helped me learn the platform a lot better. Helped me to build my projects. Larry, if you feel all right with it, could you talk about your experience as kind of a success story with the Salesforce Anchor and how it helped you?
Yeah, I first started hearing about Kyle's Salesforce Anchor, I think from Jade, as a matter of fact. So I started to check it out, started taking a look at the Abbott Elementary projects that Kyle was showing everybody. And then he actually did one too on military passes and leave. And that helped me kind of help understand relationships, between the master detail relationships, child lookups, and so forth. And then being able to learn how to use Schema Builder a lot better than what I normally use it for. So it has been an awesome experience, and it would help kickstart my cheesecake tracking app.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks for the testimony. I'll have to take a look at that cheesecake tracking app. So a couple more questions before we close out the session. Kyle, who would benefit most from the Salesforce Anchor, and most importantly, how do they sign up?
Great question. So honestly, I think it's anyone in the Salesforce space who wants to kind of push the edges of what they've used the system to do, right? Maybe you've used Salesforce, you've seen how it's been used for a playground, or specifically with a Trailhead module or super badge, and now you want to see that applied in somewhat of a more realistic use case, right? They're not all real. We use some fake TV shows. We use the North Pole. We have a course on the Santa Claus used Service Cloud, right? So they're not all necessarily real, but they're relatable. So I would say anyone there. So whether you're certified or not, I know that it has helped some people get certified. One course even has helped people get certified. You don't have to even take multiple. If you are certified and you need to build out your portfolio and you're looking for just use cases to rep that, right, to get to build around, I would say that. And then we do get into some of the designer aspects. If you're looking to do more of the UX designer, or just kind of the more just like UI, the front end more so, I would say, than the back end. There's a couple courses that really get into some creative flows, even Experience Cloud, things like that. So I think there's levels to it, whether, depending on what you want. If you're not sure, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can go to the Salesforce Anchor on LinkedIn. You can also go to salesforceanchor.com, and that will get you to all the information. So you feel free to check out all the different courses. Larry's a great resource. I know Larry's been referring people for the better part of a year now, so I appreciate your loyal advocacy. But yeah, I'm more than welcome or to reach out to me if you have questions, and I'll point you in the directions. Like, some people are like, I want to do the Sales Cloud Cert next. So there's a couple classes that are more Sales Cloud driven. There's some that are more service. There's some that are more custom. I can kind of steer you in that direction if you're interested.
Awesome. And I posted the link there to the site, so definitely access that. And then we've got probably time for one more question. I'm curious, as you grow this, do you ever need volunteers to help you manage learning tracks, or create content for new examples where you're grounding it in real world scenarios? Is that something that you've considered or actively are looking into?
Yeah, that's definitely on the roadmap, just to expand the content. Like right now, everything is out of my head, so it's just kind of limited to the experiences that I've had. But I know there's definitely interest in like a CPQ kind of course where I want to actually use it. A lot of people are looking at learning CPQ, but it's really hard to get a use case around that. There's a couple other courses that I plan my wedding on Salesforce with a dev org, and so I'm going to walk through how we kind of track things like that. But yeah, I want to expand. I want to do contests. I want to kind of see, really push the boundary. I'm a boundary pusher, right? I want to see how can you take this and do something that no one really expected. currently still a team of one, so that the progress of that is not as quick as I might like. Also have a baby due in November, so we're gonna see how much I can pull off before that. But yeah, there's definitely growth potential there. I'm also looking to get involved with different schools, some either MBA, computer science or business programs as well, to try and do some programming there with these. So the possibilities are endless. Hopefully we're still at the beginning. But yeah, definitely stay in touch, follow me for any sort of updates. And I appreciate everyone who joined today. It's been a great turnout.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And when you get to that point where you're looking for volunteers, I might know a community of individuals with a diverse set of skills that are looking for volunteer opportunities. Megan, quick question or comment from you before we close it out?
Kyle, how do you feel about my boy Patrick Mahomes?
I'm a Bengals fan, so me and Patrick Mahomes aren't very cool right now. We got to get past him in the AFC Championship, and then we'll be. But see, I'm from Cincinnati, so I'm okay with Travis Kelce. So
He is a beautiful human being inside and out, so I'll accept
He's
that.
a good-looking guy. He's a good-looking guy.
On that note, we're going to close it out. But before we do, thanks so much, Kyle, for spending the past hour with us, educating us about user training, about personal learning strategies, and about the Salesforce Anchor, an awesome resource if you're looking for real-world learning experiences grounded in apps that you can build based upon everyday scenarios. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so happy you did this. Let's do it again sometime.
We definitely will. Yeah, for sure. And thank you to all of you for spending your Wednesday evening with us. We'll see you here in a couple of weeks on the 16th. We're going to have Lori Tibbetts on. Lori's going to talk about how to gain alternative work experience by building a portfolio as one of the examples, which is what we talked about tonight. So if you're looking for that alternative work experience, join us in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please stay safe and have a great rest of your week.